When the first whispers of Malcolm Jamal Warner's secret archive began to spread, few believed it was real. Hollywood is filled with rumors, after all, and the idea that a locked storage unit could hold hidden files capable of shaking his entire legacy sounded more like tabloid fantasy than truth. But then, the photographs leaked. Grainy shots of old cardboard boxes, labeled with his handwriting, sealed tight with yellowing tape. Fans swore they could see his name scrawled across the top of one folder, and that was enough to send the industry into panic. Thought the archive had been discovered by accident, according to those close to the matter. A landlord in Los Angeles had auctioned off an abandoned storage unit after years of unpaid fees. No one expected it to belong to Malcolm. No one expected it to hold his personal diaries, cassette recordings, and unsent letters. Yet there it was, a time capsule from the actor himself. A voice from beyond the grave that no one had been prepared to hear. From the very first document that was pulled, tension began to rise. One letter, reportedly addressed to a trusted confidant, contained words that hinted at betrayal. "I gave everything to them," Malcolm had written, "and still they found a way to turn against me." No names were mentioned, but insiders quickly speculated he was referring to former colleagues from The Cosby Show. Immediately, questions began to swirl. Had there been deep fractures behind the smiles and laughter that the world saw on screen? Was the perfect family that America adored hiding dark secrets just out of sight? Fans couldn't believe it. Many of them had grown up watching him, believing the warmth between him and his on-screen family reflected real life. But according to these notes, there had been arguments, heated, explosive arguments that the cameras never captured. One page described a night when Malcolm had reportedly stormed off set after being accused of forgetting his place, though the letter didn't specify who had spoken those words. The handwriting carried the weight of resentment that had been buried for decades. The recordings only deepened the mystery. In one scratchy cassette, Malcolm's voice trembled as he described feeling trapped between loyalty and self-preservation. "I knew what they were doing was wrong," he said, "but I couldn't speak. If I spoke, it was over for me, and if I stayed quiet, I was complicit." The vague confession sparked endless theories. Was he talking about industry corruption? About the scandals that would later haunt Bill Cosby? Or something entirely different? When news of these tapes broke, former colleagues were caught off guard. Felicia Rashad, who had always defended Malcolm as her television son, reportedly broke down when asked by reporters. "I can't believe he carried this much pain," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Meanwhile, other cast members refused to comment, fueling speculation that they had something to hide. The most shocking discovery, however, was a letter written but never sent to Pamela Warner, Malcolm's mother. In it, he confessed feelings of isolation that few had ever seen from the charismatic star. "Mom, sometimes I feel like I don't belong anywhere," the note read. "People see the smile, the laughter, the talent. They don't see the nights I spend awake, wondering if any of this matters." Those words sent chills through fans around the world. To imagine someone so beloved, so admired, secretly drowning in loneliness, it shattered the picture-perfect image that had been painted for years. That as more of the archive was sorted, darker details began to emerge. There were references to unnamed enemies in the industry, people he claimed had tried to sabotage his career. One passage even suggested he believed someone was actively working behind the scenes to ensure he never landed another breakout role. "They blacklisted me," he scribbled on the margin of a script draft. "I know it. Every audition, every meeting shut down before it begins. Someone doesn't want me to rise." Suddenly, the narrative of Malcolm's career took on new meaning. For years, fans had quietly wondered why he never reached the same heights as some of his peers. He had the talent, the charisma, the recognition, and yet, his career seemed to plateau. Now, with the words from his own pen, the possibility of hidden sabotage became terrifyingly real. Friends and family were torn. Some urged for the documents to remain private, fearing they would only tarnish his legacy. Others insisted that the truth needed to be heard, that Malcolm himself would have wanted it shared. Behind closed doors, arguments broke out. His mother, devastated by the revelations, reportedly said, "This is not the Malcolm I want the world to remember." But his cousin, who helped sort the files, argued back, "This is who he was, and people deserve to know. Keeping it hidden only repeats the cycle of silence." The division in his family echoed the chaos now spreading across social media. Fans flooded comment sections with theories, grief, and anger. Some blamed Hollywood, accusing the industry of destroying yet another talented black actor. Others turned suspicion toward his closest collaborators, wondering if jealousy or power plays had poisoned relationships from within. Every new leak from the archive only stoked the fire, but nothing compared to what was discovered in a small, locked journal tucked at the very bottom of one of the boxes. The handwriting inside was sharper, almost frantic, as if written in moments of desperation. And in those pages, Malcolm made claims that stunned even his most loyal supporters. "I was never meant to survive this." One line read, "They chose me because I was easy to control, but I know their secrets now, and if I speak, it all comes crashing down." The implications were explosive. Who was they? What secrets was he referring to? And most importantly, did this journal suggest that Malcolm's death might not have been as simple as the public was told? Fans were left reeling, grasping for answers that only raised more questions. Those closest to Malcolm claimed they had no idea he'd been documenting his fears so meticulously. "If I had known," said an old friend, "I would have tried to help him, but he never let us see this side of him. He carried it alone. By the time the first half of the archive had been cataloged, it was clear this wasn't just a collection of old papers. It was a confession, a cry for help, a warning, and perhaps even a coded message to those he feared most. Yet, as dramatic as these revelations already were, those sorting through the files knew they had only scratched the surface. Because hidden beneath the journals and letters were sealed envelopes, marked with a single word: truth. And when one of those envelopes was finally torn open, the contents inside shifted the story into an even darker, more dangerous territory. And that's where part 1 ends the moment. The first truth envelope is opened, but its shocking contents are revealed in part 2. When the envelope marked truth was opened, silence fell over the room. Inside were not just handwritten notes, but photographs, dozens of them, carefully stacked, some fading with time. At first glance, they seemed harmless. Candid shots of parties, industry gatherings, family dinners. But as the pages were flipped, the story they told became far more sinister. Several of the photographs had red circles drawn around certain figures, people who at first seemed like background faces. On one, Malcolm had scrawled in the corner, "The ones who pulled the strings." In another, a man's face had been crossed out entirely with heavy black ink. The implication was chilling that Malcolm had not only identified enemies, but believed there was a shadowy group working against him. Tucked beneath the photos was a typed page, single-spaced with a heading that simply read, "My Truth." His words were blunt, sharp, almost angry. "They took everything from me." The note began, "My roles, my friends, my peace. They pretended to protect me, but every smile hid a dagger." The revelations sent shockwaves through those who saw them. One friend present at the reading admitted later, "We didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or panic. It sounded like a conspiracy theory, until we noticed the names." Because along the margins of the typed sheet, Malcolm had scribbled initial letters that fans quickly matched to some of the most powerful figures in television at the time. As whispers of those initials leaked online, speculation exploded. Threads on social media dissected every detail, comparing handwriting, connecting dots, weaving theories that reached far beyond Malcolm's personal struggles. "This isn't just his story." One viral post read, "This could expose the entire system." The drama grew even deeper when another cassette tape from the archive was played. This time, Malcolm's voice was steady, determined, as if he knew exactly what he was leaving behind. "If you're hearing this, it means they finally got what they wanted, but I'm not afraid anymore. I've written it all down. Someone has to know. Someone has to finish what I started." The tone was different from his earlier tapes, less uncertain, more like a man preparing for battle, and it ignited debates everywhere. Did Malcolm know his time was running short? Was he planning to reveal something monumental before his passing? Or had he been silenced before he got the chance? The reactions from family were heartbreaking. His cousin reportedly shouted in frustration, "Why didn't he tell us? Why keep all this locked away?" His mother, on the other hand, refused to accept the contents at face value. "He was hurting," she told reporters softly. "He wrote things when he was angry, when he was tired. This doesn't mean it's all true. I don't want people twisting his memory into something ugly." But fans weren't willing to dismiss it so easily. Every leak from the archive seemed to confirm suspicions they'd carried for years, that Malcolm had been sidelined, manipulated, and punished for speaking truths no one wanted to hear. Then came the biggest twist yet. In one folder labeled "Unfinished," a partial script was discovered. But this wasn't a television script, it was a dramatization of his own life. The characters had different names, but the parallels were undeniable. In the story, a young actor rises to fame, only to find himself trapped in a world of secrets, controlled by unseen forces. As the pages unfolded, the main character realizes he's not just an actor, but a pawn in a larger game. And the final scene of the script, the character deciding to expose everything, even if it costs him everything. Fans who read excerpts online were stunned. Was this Malcolm's way of preparing to go public? Or had he intended this script as a warning disguised as fiction? Some even argued that it was less of a story and more of a coded confession, a roadmap pointing to the very people he feared. But emotions ran high as debates split into camps. Some insisted Malcolm was paranoid, a victim of his own anxieties. Others believed he had uncovered something real, something dangerous, and had hidden his findings in plain sight. Meanwhile, former co-stars were being dragged back into the spotlight. One unnamed actor was accused of knowing more than they had admitted. A heated exchange broke out on social media when fans confronted them, demanding answers. "Stop asking me about Malcolm," the actor finally snapped in a post. "I loved him like a brother, but I don't know what demons he was fighting." That single line, "what demons he was fighting," only fanned the flames further. Because if even those closest to him didn't know the full truth, then how deep did this rabbit hole go? In the following days, journalists who had gained limited access to the archive began hinting at even darker content still unreleased. One reporter claimed there were references to payments, coded transactions, and even secret meetings at hotels. If what I saw is real, the journalist said, carefully, then we're not just talking about personal grievances. We're talking about a machine built to control people, and Malcolm may have been caught in the gears. The weight of that statement shook everyone following the story. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was betrayal, corruption, and possibly even danger on a scale no one had expected. But it wasn't only about industry power. Tucked inside another envelope was something that hit even closer to home. Malcolm had written a letter to a childhood friend, confessing that he often felt betrayed not only by Hollywood, but by those in his inner circle. "Loyalty is just a word to them," he wrote. "They smile in my face, then cut me down behind my back. I don't know who to trust anymore." That line struck like a dagger, because it wasn't about strangers or executives, it was about people he loved. Friends, colleagues, maybe even family. Suddenly, every person who had ever been close to him came under suspicion. The family itself was left divided. His cousin demanded that the entire archive be released publicly, saying, "Let the world decide what to believe." But his mother stood firm, insisting, "Not everything needs to be shared. Some wounds should stay private." The arguments grew so intense that insiders claimed shouting matches erupted during private family meetings, with slammed doors and tears. And yet, through all of this, the archive kept revealing more. Toward the bottom of another box was a sealed notebook, its cover cracked with age. Inside were journal entries from his teenage years, before fame had even touched him. The handwriting was messy, emotional, raw. And in those entries, a young Malcolm wrote about his dreams, his fears, and his distrust of the world even then. "They see me as a tool," he scrawled at 16. "Even before I knew what fame was, I knew they wanted to shape me into something one wasn't." Reading those words decades later was haunting. It suggested that Malcolm had been wary, even as a child, that forces around him were trying to mold his life for their own purposes. The weight of it all was almost unbearable. Fans online admitted they couldn't sleep after reading the leaks, their minds spinning with possibilities. One viral comment summed it up: "We thought we knew Malcolm, but now I wonder if we ever really did." The tension reached a breaking point when another envelope, this one thicker than the rest, was opened. Inside was a collection of contracts, annotated heavily in Malcolm's own handwriting. Entire sections were underlined, with notes like "Why this clause?" and "This is how they trap me." The most chilling note of all sat beside a paragraph about royalties. "This is where they'll make sure I never see a dime." The idea that Malcolm had been cheated financially as well as emotionally set off a firestorm. Fans demanded investigations. Some even called for lawsuits against production companies. And suddenly, what had started as a forgotten storage unit had escalated into a movement to demand for justice. But before those contracts could even be fully analyzed, something else was uncovered. At the very back of the box, taped to the underside of the lid, was a small folded note. In barely legible handwriting, it read, "If they find this, it means I didn't make it out." That was the line that froze everyone in the room, and that's where part 2 closes. The terrifying discovery of a possible final message, hinting that Malcolm may have feared for his very life. The room went cold when that final note was read, aloud. "If they find this, it means I didn't make it out." The words seemed to echo in the silence, heavier than any contract or cassette tape. Even those who had dismissed the archive as the ramblings of a troubled man could no longer ignore the chilling possibility that Malcolm had left behind a warning not just about betrayal, but about danger. And with that discovery, the story was no longer just about Malcolm. It was about power. It was about control. And it was about the terrifying possibility that he had stumbled into something far larger than anyone imagined. The world watched in shock, waiting for answers. And that's where part 3 closes, the revelation of the mysterious photo and the haunting words. The council, leaving everyone desperate to know who they were and what role they played in his downfall. Photograph of the council spread across every news outlet like wildfire. Within hours, the grainy black and white image was dissected frame by frame. Faces digitally enhanced, backgrounds analyzed, every shadow scrutinized. Who were these men? What were they discussing? And why did Malcolm label them with such ominous words? Online forums turned into war rooms. Some believed the council were high-ranking executives who had shaped Hollywood from the shadows for decades. Others insisted they were government officials using entertainment as a weapon of influence. A few more radical voices even claimed the council was tied to secret societies, blending myth with the evidence at hand. But one thing united all theories. Malcolm had not stumbled onto something small. He had uncovered a network, one he feared enough to document, photograph, and hide away until it was too late. Journalists began chasing leads, combing through old film records, studio archives, and political photographs from the era. Astonishingly, one researcher claimed to have matched one of the men in the photo to a retired senator who had abruptly vanished from public life in the late 1980s. Another face was said to resemble a media mogul who had funded multiple controversial projects before quietly selling off his empire. The deeper the digging went, the more questions arose. Why did these men meet with a young Malcolm at all? Had he been groomed, recruited, or simply caught in the wrong room at the wrong time? Fans demanded answers, but officials refused to acknowledge the photo at all. Press inquiries were deflected, records missing, or inaccessible. It was as though the council had been scrubbed from history, leaving only Malcolm's hidden evidence as proof they ever existed. Meanwhile, whispers began surfacing from those who had once worked closely with Malcolm. A former co-star revealed that during the height of his career, Malcolm would sometimes show up to set drained and anxious. He'd sit in the corner between takes, scribbling in his notebook. If you asked him what he was writing, he'd just smile and say, "Insurance. I thought it was a joke." Now I think he meant these archives. The word insurance struck a chord. It suggested Malcolm had been gathering these notes, tapes, and recordings, not just out of fear, but as a shield, a way of protecting himself should anyone try to silence him. But if it had been insurance, it hadn't worked. And that realization chilled people to the bone. The leaks kept coming. One of the mini-discs contained a longer conversation, this time between Malcolm and an unidentified man with a deep, gravelly voice. Malcolm's tone was pleading. "I don't want to be part of this anymore," he repeated. "Please, just let me out." The man's reply was calm but cutting. "There's no out, Malcolm. The only way out is silence." That recording, only a few minutes long, was enough to reignite outrage. Protests outside studios swelled in size, now spilling into streets, blocking traffic, demanding answers. Candlelight vigils were held in his honor, with fans holding up posters that read "Malcolm knew" and "No more silence." But behind the passion was a growing sense of dread. If the council really existed, if they were powerful enough to erase their own history, what would they do now that the world had their name? Strange things began happening. Investigative journalists who had been covering the story reported break at their homes, laptops stolen, hard drives wiped. One outspoken podcaster claimed her car brakes had mysteriously failed on the freeway, though no one could prove foul play. The fear that Malcolm's shadow was now falling over anyone who dared to speak his truth was impossible to ignore. His family grew increasingly reclusive, avoiding cameras and refusing interviews. His cousin, once vocal, vanished from social media entirely. Insiders said the family had been warned to stop feeding the fire, and yet, the fire refused to die. A leaked email surfaced, allegedly from a former studio executive, bluntly stating Malcolm wasn't supposed to keep those files. He was supposed to hand them over. When he didn't, things spiraled. Though the email's authenticity could not be confirmed, it fueled the narrative that Malcolm's death had been more than tragic coincidence, it had been consequence. Everywhere, people debated the same haunting question: was Malcolm Jamal Warner silenced? As this question hung heavy, an unexpected voice entered the conversation. Eddie Griffin, known for his sharp tongue and unwillingness to play by Hollywood's rules, spoke out during a late-night comedy set. "Y'all ever wonder why Malcolm vanished the way he did?" he asked the audience. "You think that was natural? Nah, man. That was a message. A warning to the rest of us. Stay quiet, or else." The clip of Griffin's set went viral overnight. Fans latched onto his words, convinced that a fellow insider had just confirmed their darkest suspicions. Some argued he was exaggerating for comedic effect, but others insisted comedians often tell the truth under the guise of jokes. Griffin's single quotes S remarks marked a turning point. Until then, most celebrities had kept their distance from the controversy, afraid of tarnishing their careers or drawing unwanted attention, but his boldness cracked the silence. Slowly, others began dropping cryptic comments, vague enough to deny if pressed, but clear enough for fans to interpret as agreement. The movement grew louder. The council, once a blurry photo in an envelope, had now become the face of hidden corruption in Hollywood. Malcolm had become a symbol, not just of tragedy, but of resistance. And yet, amidst the noise, a darker possibility began creeping in. What if this was exactly what the council wanted? What if the leaks and chaos were orchestrated not to reveal the truth, but to bury it under waves of speculation, paranoia, and confusion? Because the more the story spread, the less clear it became. Dozens of theories contradicted each other. Thousands of voices shouted over one another. What was truth? What was exaggeration? What was disinformation planted to muddy the waters? The deeper people dug, the murkier it all seemed. And that uncertainty was perhaps the cruelest twist of all. Malcolm's single quotes are archived, once believed to hold answers, now felt like a labyrinth of questions with no exit. And as part 4 closes, the world stands at a crossroads, demanding justice, demanding truth, but realizing that the deeper they go, the more dangerous it becomes. And somewhere, in the shadows, the council, if they truly exist, watches it all unfold, silent and unseen. As weeks passed, the noise around Malcolm's archive only grew louder, but clarity remained just out of reach. Every news outlet ran endless specials, Every podcast dropped exclusive insights, and every influencer claimed to know someone who knew someone who had seen the full collection. And yet, no one had the whole truth. That was when another leak dropped, this one far more dangerous than anything before. An anonymous source uploaded a series of scanned letters online handwritten by Malcolm himself. These weren't cryptic notes or coded drawings. These were pleas to whoever finds this. One letter began, the handwriting shaky, uneven, as if scrawled under pressure. If anything happens to me, no, this wasn't an accident. I've tried to walk away, I've tried to keep quiet, but they won't let me. They want control, not just of my career, but of all of us. I don't know how long I have. Another page was even more haunting. My friends keep telling me I'm paranoid, but how do I explain the phone clicks? The cars parked outside my house, the scripts I never agreed to, suddenly carrying my name. They're not just watching, they're writing my story for me. The internet exploded. If these letters were authentic, then Malcolm hadn't just suspected danger, he had documented it, begging for someone to listen. Doubters scrambled to dismiss the letters as forgeries, arguing the handwriting could be faked, but fans weren't. Convinced handwriting experts weighed in, with several saying the style matched known samples from Malcolm's old notes and autographs. The words, the flow, the pressure of the pen, it was all him. Bet? And then came the final blow. One of the uploaded letters contained a list. Not vague sketches of council members this time, but names. Real names. Some belonged to long-retired figures in politics and media, but others were shockingly current. A major studio CEO, a beloved talk show host, even the head of a philanthropic foundation long praised for charity work. The idea that these household names could be tied to Malcolm's shadowy counsel sent shockwaves through the industry. Within hours of the leak, lawyers descended like hawks. Cease and desist letters were sent to websites hosting the scans. Major platforms began scrubbing posts under claims of defamation and unverified information. But the internet, once lit, could not be extinguished. The names had already gone viral, whispered in group chats, posted in comments, screamed in live streams. Suddenly, the story wasn't just about Malcolm Jamal Warner. It was about Hollywood itself. Who could fans trust? Who was real, and who had been playing a role, not just on screen, but in life. Meanwhile, his family found themselves thrust into a nightmare. Malcolm's niece gave an emotional interview, tears streaking down her face as she admitted, "We begged him to stop digging. We told him to focus on his art, on his family. But he couldn't." He said if he didn't tell the truth, he couldn't live with himself. Now we're the ones left to deal with the storm. Her words broke hearts. It wasn't just a scandal anymore, it was personal. A man's obsession with uncovering secrets had cost him everything, and his loved ones were paying the price. But then came a twist no one saw coming. A hacker collective, claiming to act in Malcolm's memory, announced that they had retrieved the entire archive, every tape, every photo, every letter, thousands of files supposedly copied before authorities could lock them away. And they promised to release it all. Panic gripped the industry. Rumors swirled that bacchanal deals were being struck, that quiet negotiations were happening in boardrooms to prevent the release. Others said the hackers themselves had been infiltrated, their servers compromised before the truth could come out. But one night, without warning, the files dropped. Millions of downloads in the first hour alone. Chaos followed. The recordings revealed conversations between executives and politicians casually discussing which stories would be buried, which careers would be redirected, which actors were too problematic to allow on stage. Photographs showed secret gatherings in lavish estates, where decisions affecting entire industries were made behind closed doors. But the most shocking pieces were Malcolm's private voice memos, spoken into an old recorder late at night. "No, they'll never let this see daylight," he whispered in one. "But if you're hearing this, then maybe I was wrong. Maybe someone finally listened. If you are listening, don't stop. Don't let them bury me twice." Those words became a rallying cry, painted on walls, printed on t-shirts, chanted at rallies. Don't let them bury me twice. Malcolm, once just a beloved actor, had become a symbol of defiance against corruption, secrecy, and control. But with the symbol came consequences. Lawsuits flew in every direction. Talk shows avoided the topic. Celebrities stayed eerily quiet. The few who dared to comment like Griffin before found themselves suddenly dropped from projects, their endorsements evaporating overnight. And through it all, fans were divided. Some believed wholeheartedly that Malcolm had uncovered the dark heart of Hollywood, and his death was a direct result. Others insisted the frenzy was nothing more than internet hysteria, fueled by half-truths and coincidences. But no one could deny one fact. Malcolm's secret archive had shaken the foundations of an empire. In the end, the story had no neat resolution. Some of the names were never investigated. Some tapes were dismissed as doctored. The council, whether real or myth, never surfaced publicly. And yet, the shadow they cast lingered, heavier than ever. What remained was a question one Malcolm himself had asked in his final memo. When you know the truth, what will you do with it? As fans debated in comment sections, lit candles at vigils, and spread his words across social media, the legacy of Malcolm Jamal Warner lived on not just as an actor, but as a man who refused to stay silent, even when silence might have saved him. The archive may have opened the door, but what lay behind it was something no one could close again, and somewhere, in the quiet spaces between fact and fear, the council real or imagined remained untouched, their power unshaken, their silence louder than any denial. And so, with the final files out in the open, the world was left reeling. The image of Malcolm Jamal Warner as a quiet, steady actor had been shattered, replaced by something far more complex. A whistleblower, a prophet, maybe even a martyr. The archive wasn't just a collection of notes and recordings, it was a mirror held up to an industry built on secrets. But even with so much exposed, the biggest questions remain unanswered. Who was really behind the council he described? Were the names on those lists truly guilty, or were they framed to create chaos? Why did it take so long for his voice to be heard? And most chilling of all, if Malcolm was silenced for what he knew, how many others have been silenced too? Emotions ran high as families grieved, fans rallied, and the industry scrambled to control the narrative. Some believe this is only the beginning, that more archives from others will soon follow. Others fear this was the last spark of truth we'll ever see before the curtain is pulled shut again. But one thing is undeniable: Malcolm's words, his warnings, and his courage have ignited a fire that can't be put out. And now, the story is in your hands. What do you believe? Was Malcolm Jamal Warner a man uncovering truths too dangerous for Hollywood to allow? Or was this archive nothing more than a tragic illusion built on paranoia? Could the council still be operating in the shadows today? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Do you see Malcolm as a hero, a victim, or something else entirely? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more deep dives into the stories Hollywood doesn't want you to hear, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update, because as this story proves, silence can be deadly, and truth may be the only weapon we have left.